tried to control my drinking for years and known that I had a very questionable relationship with it. It really scared me. But it was that event that I was like, okay, I'm going to ask for help. And wouldn't you know, people put me in a direction that I received help and thankfully have been sober since then, which is really the coolest thing I've ever done.
Good morning. Another episode of How's My Drinking? Hey, Marcella, how you doing?
Great. How are you doing?
Good. Excited. This is, I believe, our 4th episode, right?
Yeah, go us.
Yeah, I think we have a great guest. Everyone's gonna, I believe, love this podcast episode as well, amongst all the others and probably future ones too. But yeah, I'll let you kind of do the intro.
Yeah, definitely. I am honestly super excited for our guest today. Her name is Claire Bays. And I'm actually just going to go ahead and let her introduce herself. But today's a little bit different. Most of our podcasts have been more like healthcare driven. But today we are diving into the fitness industry. So, Claire, who are you? Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah. One, thank you for having me here. Thank you for choosing to do this. And also just the fact that you're 4 episodes in, I'm just excited for you guys in this experience. So I hope it goes really well and I hope you enjoy it. Okay. So I am Claire Bays. I am originally from Oklahoma, a small town in Oklahoma, Shawnee. And then I lived in Norman, Oklahoma for 11 years after that. So 18 years there, 11 years there. And then I recently moved to Austin, Texas a few years ago. So since you mentioned that we're going to be going into the fitness realm, let me just say that I played no sports growing up. And so fitness was not actually a part of my life until I was in my 20s. And I originally at 18 years old started to struggle with my own weight. I grew up in an environment where that was something that many struggled with and was up close and personal with what obesity and morbid obesity does to a person's quality of life. And so although I had poor dietary habits unknowingly and so on, I hadn't yet really experienced physical repercussions from that growing up. So then 18 years old, I start to gain weight kind of rapidly, and that was kind of disturbing to me. And so that's when I first started to turn my gaze to nutrition and of course developed some really challenging seasons of disordered eating and things like that through that, because as you try to figure that out, most of us bump into walls really hard, and I certainly did. And then it was in my early 20s when I finally started going to a gym. And so I don't know if we want to go there first, but either way, today I'm 32 now and I am a personal trainer. And so I have a slew of certifications, whether it's fitness or nutrition and so on. So I run an online business where I do coaching for those things, as well as an in-person day-to-day coaching business for that as well. And so now it's really cool to see the trajectory from never been to start to become, start to get into that world, being terrified, moving poorly for years, not understanding much, starting to get certifications out of curiosity with no anticipation to use them professionally, to now like that's full time what I do. So that's super cool. And then I'm assuming that we'll go there as well, that alcoholism is also a part of my story. And so I spent 15 years from age 14 to 28 drinking pretty heavily, 13 to 28, and then sobered up almost 4 years ago. So that's another big piece of it.
Awesome. That's great. That's wonderful. Yeah, I mean, maybe we could touch a little bit more on kind of your journey, right, with alcohol. What is it that kind of led to your sobriety? How did it shape your entire life and career to where you're at now? So maybe you could touch a little bit on that.
Yeah. Well, I think like a lot of individuals I grew up in a rural area and there was not a lot of oversight. I have incredible parents, but they were working very hard. They worked a lot of hours. So I had a lot of time on my hands to not have oversight. And so I found alcohol at 13, and it just so happened to conveniently align with the time where, of course, when you're in your early teens and that stage of life, you're this awkward duckling. And I certainly was that. And so I wasn't cute and I wasn't, anyway, it conveniently aligned with the time when all of a sudden I introduced alcohol into the picture, and now boys want to talk to me. Oh my gosh. And I need you to love me. And now you guys think I'm fun. So and there were no repercussions at that age, really, it was just, so that's when alcohol got introduced to me. And then I went through many years of, it would definitely, ride the waves of some seasons. It was a lot more present, and some seasons it was less present, depending on what other factors were going on in my life. But over the course of that 15 years, my relationship with alcohol went from just fun to the fun with consequences to by the time I got sober, it was really just consequences. I wasn't having fun at all anymore. And so 15 years in, by now I'm 28 and nearly 29. My grandmother passed away 2 months prior to me getting sober. And that was my first experience with grief. She had the largest hand in my day to day and my upbringing. She was very, very close to me. And so whenever she passed away, I did stuff because that's what I'm a doer. But once the doing was over, I was like, well, I have this coping mechanism and I've heard of grief and I don't want to do that. So I'm just going to numb. And by that point, other substances, because throughout the course of that 15 years, if you are an alcoholic like me, there's never enough. Once you start, you never know where you're going to need to take it, but there's no such thing as enough. And so I had started to introduce other substances as well. And so by that point, I was definitely just trying to outrun grief, and that didn't work out. And 2 months into that, what I would consider bender. And by then, I had gotten in a real habit of traveling in order to be able to facilitate these behaviors and kind of trying to compartmentalize my life and keep the people in my day to day not aware of what I was really up to because certainly it wasn't something I was proud of. And I just didn't understand that I had this unique relationship with this substance that I wasn't going to be able to interact with it normally. And so, anyway, 2 months in, just a publicly humiliating event occurred. And it was the first time in my life where because you drink like that for 15 years and you're going to accumulate trauma. So I had traumas and things that occurred where people typically would have something like that go on and go, okay, got to stop that. That can never happen again. And of course, I had many times where that would take place. That can never happen again. But I'm a ticking time bomb till I need the next drink because I don't yet know that I have this unique relationship with this substance. And so by the time that I have succumbed to my phenomenon of craving, as we call it, then I'm off to the races again and I'm not in control of what's going to happen here. So the public humiliation piece was motivating enough for me to finally go, you don't even recognize yourself anymore. You're so desperate for all of these other individuals' approval and you're no longer getting it. And if you don't drink, you won't be in rooms like this having situations like this occur. So you have got to stop. So I had tried to control my drinking for years prior to that and known that I had a very questionable relationship with it. It really scared me. And then, but it was that event that I was like, okay, I'm going to ask for help. And wouldn't you know, people put me in a direction that I received help and thankfully have been sober since then, which is really the coolest thing I've ever done.
No, that's an awesome story. I mean, I think a lot of people, they tend to have a hard time wanting to get help too. So it's great where it's like you realize yourself, it's like, okay, I'm at a point where I need change. So, I'm going to look for that help. And yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I like it being described this way when it comes to change, as much as because you can think of individuals that you love that you wish would change something about their lives because you feel that it would be positively impactful to their quality of life, right? A loved one that we wish would do blank. But change, like I'm kind of regurgitating something I read from Stephen Covey, the author of Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, in saying that is kind of this is a gate that you must open from within, and so that change I had to deeply desire it enough for myself for it to be effective and then was able to open it and walk through it, thankfully, with help of others.
Yeah.
I have a question for you because I relate a lot to your story. Like we have very similar stories. I started drinking when I was 14, no oversight from my parents. I just wanted the approval of definitely boys at that age. But it sounds like you are the one that realized that you had that bad relationship with alcohol. Did anybody in your life ever point that out to you? Or was it something that you were like, I can't do this anymore?
I think people didn't say much that I'm aware of, but keep in mind, I had created an environment that was really supportive of my behavior.
Yeah.
I chose to hang out in bars where it's normal. I chose to hang out in rooms where it's normal. And I did have all of these friends that weren't going to act up like that. And so I would hang out with them and I loved being with them, but I knew how to hide what I was actually up to from them. And I knew that I was going to go somewhere later where I could do what I needed to do in a different environment. So were there people that once I got sober, there was a combination. There were friends of mine that said, you don't have a problem. What are you talking about? I'm like, you just don't understand. Like, you really don't know what all I've really been up to. And then there were people who, once, for example, my parents, as soon as I finally told them, hey, I'm getting sober, here's what I'm doing. I'm so blessed that they were very supportive of that. They started to read literature about what it is, alcoholism, so that they could better understand me, which is so cool. I'm very grateful for that. And they certainly did express like, we knew you had a problem, So there were a lot of people that maybe at least knew Claire likes to drink, Claire does blank.
Yeah.
Claire's a little bit like off the rocker, right? But I also had this ability to intake an abnormally large volume of it and seem to be fine.
Mhm.
And so I can look at the photos of those days of my life and see my face and see that no one's home. And I'm like, that's not even me. But yeah, so it's a combination.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally relate to that. And now question, like, as far as your recovery goes, I know that you became a personal trainer and you do CrossFit as well. Like, how would you say fitness has impacted your recovery?
Yeah, it's such a cool storyline with fitness. I believe that it is potentially somewhat unique. A lot of individuals, I say that there are going to be so many that relate to this, but a lot of individuals will get sober and then get into fitness. And that is such a beautiful thing to do. You hear so many incredible stories about that. And so I definitely encourage someone who is trying to get sober to try fitness as well in whatever capacity they're comfortable with, works for them, resonates with them. Because if you have this coping mechanism for life and then you take it away, you're going to need another one because life's and it's a great one to utilize. And so, but for me, I was always so in 2009, 2010, I'm watching on YouTube, I see certain individuals like Dana Lynn Bailey, and she was a bodybuilder at that time. And I see people like Annie Thor's daughter, and that was my first exposure to CrossFit was her. And so but this is well before I started. In fact, I'm still in high school at this point. And so this is well before I think that this is a potential option for me, right? But they inspired me. Seeing these empowered women who were capable of great things and had this confidence and empowerment was so desirable. So 2013, well, I go into a gym, CrossFit gym in 2013, and I just was like, these people know what they're doing. I don't. I'm going to get hurt. This is so over my head. I'm driving around the block and driving home. I don't even make it a month on membership, and I just can't do it at that stage of my life. I had then started going to like a Gold's Express and doing some of my own stuff. And I feel like most people, whenever they first start to get into it, like I could go like on a treadmill and I could go running and things like that, right?
Yeah.
Because those things make more sense than those scary machines. And so thankfully, then I finally had some friends start to show me around machines and try to teach me how to do certain things. And then in 2016 is when I returned to the CrossFit gym. And that time I stayed. But then even with that, because I didn't have any athletic background or anything like that, I was not very coachable. And so anytime a coach would come and try to speak to me, I just wanted the heat off of me. I didn't actually believe that I had the capacity to get better at any of this stuff. I didn't know how to receive that and actually implement that at that point. And so I stayed pretty bad at stuff for about 4 years before finally the right person said, "Hey, why don't you actually apply yourself and believe that you could get better at this? Because I think that you can." And so then I started to get significantly better. But 2021 is when I get sober, right?
Mm.
So I already just mentioned all of this timeline
Yeah.
where I'm still having this relationship with substances that is less than desirable. And so it was this yet again compartmentalization of life of like, I love this thing. This is great, right? The fitness was always wonderful and I loved it, but then I still had this other behavior going on. And so there was an overlap there that went on for years. And then in 2020, when I got sober, then of course, not only did my fitness just increase, but I also think it's kind of fun to note that right after I got sober, I got into endurance cycling. And so I was cycling, well over 100 miles a week. On the weekends, I would do 60, 70, 80-mile rides every Saturday, whatever, just because I had all of this energy that I was dumping into these places. And now I'm no longer going in those places. I don't fit in there anymore. And I have all this energy I got to dump somewhere. So I dumped it there. So in early sobriety, I really needed to lean on my fitness a lot, like a lot of hours of my day just kind of dumped there. And then over the course of the past few years, now I still have a relationship with fitness where I do it daily. Obviously, it's a big part of my life, but that I don't need that resource in the way that I did at that time. And I just love all of that. Like I love all of those pieces of that journey. And I think it's perfectly okay to be at any stage of it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So would you say that, your that fitness really help you overcome that habit in a way, like the drinking habit?
Totally. Yeah. Because it had been a part of my life for a number of years. But if you look at that shortly after getting sober thing, that's when I went from, my one class a day with my friends that I really enjoyed and I did and I loved it. But then like now I need to occupy many more hours of my day with something and I have no idea what to do. And so then the volume of it shoots up, right? And of course I got really lean on accidents and It's also really common for people in early sobriety to have their weight really yo-yo back and forth because of
Yeah.
another coping mechanism is food, right? And so even simultaneously while that's going on, I still have this, okay, so I'm either coping with my exercise or I'm self-soothing with overeating. There was a lot going on, but that's all very human. But yes, it did play a big role, and it certainly just plays a big role now today and forever in life.
Yeah.
That's the goal.
I'm kind of curious on you touched on earlier about the 7 habits, right, of successful individuals and stuff like that. And I think like correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's 65 days of continuous habit in order for it to become like kind of repetitive. I don't know if it was in the same book or it was maybe a different one, but I'm kind of curious, like what's that? Is there a mental shift that you essentially had, or is it where you kind of start overflowing your life with fitness where the idea of drinking and maybe going out just gets smaller and smaller. So you're like more busy, staying fit and being in CrossFit and doing everything else. Or was it really just like, this isn't good for me. I got to start forming these new habits. And this is how I'm going to be successful in my recovery journey.
Yeah, I love this question. And this is where we're going to pivot from the fitness. And I'm going to tell you the truth of a huge component of this that's not at all to do with the fitness. And so, yes, the fitness is great and that's a huge part of it. However, so how was I able to step away from it and how am I able to stay away from it today? So I get sober and I reach out to a friend. And that was what started is I reach out to a friend who I know is sober, who also has struggled in the past. And I was like, I know you figured this thing out and like, I got to do it. Like, I need to get sober. And so she met with me and she gave me some literature and she invited me to be a part of a community that is, and by the way, for anybody listening that would like further resources on that stuff, if you guys are comfortable with it, I would just tell them to DM me if they want my resources and I will share those with them that I have found to be effective. But so I got plugged into a community of sober people, right? And
Mhm.
they said things like, hey, sweetie, you've been living entirely based on yourself your entire life and you're going to need to try something different now because look at that, look where that's gotten you. And so they told me I was going to have to believe in a power greater than me, right? I was going to have a higher power. And so that was I didn't like that. I didn't like that at all. I had been burned by religion as many have, and I really had negative sentiments around religious people and you name it. And today I'm just a spiritual individual. And so anyway, I needed to develop a spiritual life, right? And so daily prayer on my knees was one of the first recommendations that even when I started doing it, I'm looking at the ceiling going, there's this white bearded man in a robe and this is weird, right? Like, but I was desperate. And so I did what I was told to do by people who had seen more success with it than I had. And so throughout all of this time, another huge component of stopping and staying stopped has been they also provided me with education about what it is that happens to me when I drink and why it is that I can't seem to stop, And so that then gave me perspective that I'd never previously had. I knew that I had issues with it. I knew that I had abnormal behavior with it, but I didn't realize that I suffered from alcoholism, which then means that I have this physical allergy. I've got all this stuff going on. I'm going to need some help to overcome. And so those parts of it, yes, fitness has been a beautiful piece of that journey, but getting new vocabulary, getting new understanding of what it is that makes my relationship with this substance unique for me, and then being given some different tools for life, what I like to call a new operating system for life is what they've given me. And those include today actually having a spiritual life that kind of keep things running. On the fitness side of things, so one other thing I didn't mention, but I actually talked about on my story on Instagram today, was just that when I first got sober, I did 75 hard shortly after. And then I've done it 2 more times since then. And so 75 hard, you mentioned the 65 days ish for a
Mhm.
habit. I don't truly know what the number is. I've heard a bunch of different numbers quoted, but I mentioned on my story today how it was interesting to me that these days I have a tendency to read every single day. These days I have a tendency to just be aware if I haven't, because I do a lot of online coaching. So my life can be really sedentary out of the fitness that I choose to do. And so if I haven't moved a lot that day, I just like know to go for a walk. And like,
Okay.
where did those habits come from? Well, maybe I've done 3 times over 75 hard. So what is that? 225 days of drilling in these habits. And so they're not as rigid and I don't have a checklist today, but they
Mhm.
still just happen. And then that makes me think of a quote that I will read if that's okay, because it kind of pairs with this nicely. But it's just that which we persist in doing becomes easier. Not that the nature of the task has changed, but our ability to do has increased. And that's from Emerson. And that just, I feel like really well aligns with all of that.
Yeah, that's great advice on that. It's like, for example, I told Marcella this, I think it was about a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, signed up for the gym. got a year-long membership, probably went, twice and I stopped. And I think the biggest thing for me was that habit forming capability of like, okay, so I got kids, I got the work life and everything. So I had to wake up 5 something in the morning to be able to go to the gym.
Yeah.
And the first time around, I failed at it. So there goes my membership for a whole year. I've signed back up again as of probably early last year. And I'm waking up now, right? Because I kind of continued with that habit. I kept thinking of it in a way of like, okay, well, I wake up every morning, I brush my teeth, right? I know to do that. I could be completely asleep, walking around, the house, but I know I'm going to go brush my teeth.
Yeah.
And it's essentially the same thing. So it becomes like that habit forming factor where it helps you either crave it or, if I do something different, I'm going to stop doing that particular activity. So yeah, that's great too. And I mean, so I guess like another piece would be advice you would give. And I think prior to starting to record the podcast, we were kind of talking about this where everyone's different. And while we believe that we might be a small group of individuals, we still touch a lot of people, right? So there's a lot that probably have the exact same story that you do, or, they're having the challenge of maybe getting to the point that you're at right now. So for that individual that's listening today, what's kind of advice you would give them to kind of help them get to the point that you did, and where you're at right now?
Yeah. So, and I want to come back to your story of your experience with the gym, but in regards to what advice I would give to those individuals, they are uniquely themselves. And so I don't believe that my method is the perfect and only method at all. What I do know that did work for me and in this lane of life, but also anytime I've needed real help, whether it's been in my financial life or in other areas, I can think of specific instances where a consistent theme for me is once I can take enough, like I can, the shame and the guilt that I experience about whatever it is that I'm up to, whether it is with my finances or it is with my substances or it is with my food, whatever it is, once I can finally find somewhere safe to take that information and tell someone the truth and ask for help, I've invariably found that I receive help. And so I'm choosing to take this at this point. I'm mindful of who I go to, right? I'm going to go to someone that I think can actually positively impact me in that area of life. And the way that I identify that is, do they have what I want in that area of life? And if they have it, then okay, I might feel safe to go there. And then for me, once I can tell someone the truth, then usually they're going to give me specific instructions based on what's worked for them. And then it's up to me to actually do the thing, right?
Sure.
But that's a great starting point for me. When you said about your experience with the gym and only having gone a couple of days, but now you're going back again and developing this new habit, this new relationship with it, one, I'm so excited for you. And two, I want to almost challenge you in that a lot of the work that I do today, obviously, is in coaching people with these things because physical health is something that everyone desires having a better relationship with. I say everyone, but the vast majority of individuals with wherever they're at, right? And what I feel, my opinion is that what we need to do is align. So our physical health, if we can find what our core values are today, and so we've got to identify our values, but then if we can find a way, so for me, for example, service is one of my core values, and the other ones are more fun and selfish, but I'll just say service is one of them. So because I know that my care for my physical health directly aligns with my core values of service, I'm only able to be of service to others to a certain capacity if I'm not taking care of myself. Now my ability to adhere to those practices is so much greater. So yes, I have time under my belt doing those things, but there are still things I wish to grow. But when I work with clients, I really love starting all the way back with, yes, we know that you want to go to the gym more. We know that you want to eat less processed food. We know you want to eat less sugar. You want to reduce your alcohol intake, whatever. Let's come back to, we have to rediscover where your values are and then find ways to get you to live in alignment with them. And so anyway, I don't know if that resonates with you at all, but that's a really cool thing because that gives us a more firm foundation for whenever the circumstances of the kids and the inconveniences and the life that you have that is very full and very busy takes place of like, man, but this aligns with my values so heavily that I'm going to find a way to make this a working part of my life. And then I love that today we know that it doesn't have to be so rigid and so extreme in order to get it done with our health. It can be a lot more fluid and a lot more enjoyable and less intense, which is cool.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. Like a lot of times, like you'll consider it at, oh, okay, if I go to the gym, there's only one particular goal, right? It's either I want to lose weight or I just want to get in shape. But to your point, it's like just that alone could fit into your life a lot more. There's so many things that it could help and benefit. So really understanding,
Totally.
what it is that you're trying to accomplish from it in general, it could lead to like, okay, well, this is why I need to be going to the gym. This is how it's going to help me, how it's going to affect even people around me. So that's a very good point.
Yeah.
And I would say, Claire, too, like that definitely would, like in recovery as well. Like, why are you wanting to have a better relationship with alcohol? Like, what, the values
Hmm.
around it. So I
Mhm.
love that advice.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think any one of these individual behavior changes we try to make in life, like I think that often they stem from like in some way we're living out of alignment with what we feel that our values are. And we may be totally unconscious to any of that, right? But like
Mhm.
I was speaking with a client of mine just yesterday who like had a binge and he's not a binge eater and he had a binge and he's crushing it on his fitness, right? He's been doing so like literally he's crazy. He's crazy. And so he had this binge and it lasted for multiple days and we were talking about it. But he was like, well, this isn't really like, I'm not really that worried about it, whatever. And like, well, you're talking about it because it's bothering you. And that's okay. I'm like, I think ultimately it's just simply because, like, could it be that it is just outside of your like self mastery as a priority to this individual? And I know it. And so I feel like his disdain for this experience that he had that's random, one off, he'll be fine. And that's what we talked about. Like, you won't be just fine. Right. But I feel that it somehow didn't align with his values, that somewhere in there, there's this self mastery that's a clear priority to him. It's like, well, no wonder it bothers you. And if it didn't bother him, who, I don't have anything to say about it. If it didn't bother him at all, like if it aligns with his values, like keep going. I don't think I know what's best for you. But since we were discussing it, it's like maybe it isn't just something, what is it
Yeah.
that has got you so with the alcohol as well, like why is this bothering you that you show up in this way with this substance? Could it be because it's not in alignment with your values? So I realize I'm
Yep.
getting really abstract and woo woo, but I also feel like it's
No, I love it.
Yeah.
big stuff.
You're absolutely right. And then, clear question for you. You are definitely a little Instagram baddie out there. So, how do you use your platform, or do you use your platform in any way to kind of give the message like recovery and fitness can coexist?
Yeah. I am not a social media expert. Let me start there at all. So if you want one of those, you should go talk to someone else. But I have had the opportunity to use my Instagram and other social media platforms to share whatever it is that I want to share. And so what I find with that, and there have been seasons because when people started to show up early, like when I first started to use that platform in that way, it was originally just because a brand was asking me to post certain content or promote their products. So I found that if I was funny and so on, then I could do that. Anyway, so all these people showed up, but that was before I was a coach. So now these people have had to go on this journey with me of like, what does she do? Like she's totally transitioning her life. It's just been interesting. But it freaked me out too, because all of a sudden, all these people that I didn't personally know, which hadn't been there before, are now there. And now they had expectations. And we know I like to please people, you know? So it was really weird. And it kind of, so I posted a lot and then I got really freaked out. And so I kind of held back a little bit. And then I am working on it's so much better today, but working on my relationship with it even today of like, use this tool to facilitate this purpose that you feel that you have today, which is cool because even when I started doing it, I can't say that that was a motivator. But I feel like with any one of these things, whether it is spirituality or it is fitness or it is nutrition or it is mindset or it is whatever, sobriety, any of the topics that I choose to share on my platform, it's because they are of interest to me, right? And I just want to share that. And I feel like with social media, for me, what resonates the most is the concept of attraction rather than promotion. And so instead of trying to promote things, and I don't believe that I nail this perfectly by any means because I do promote my business there because I believe in the mission and I would love for people to join in, right? But either way, living a life so attractive that it creates curiosity for others. Like that's kind of the move I feel is just that like your responsibility is to try to create a life to the best of your ability that does align with those values and then just live it. So much so that people who feel like they're struggling in whichever area that that is become attracted to it and maybe want to learn what you've like you can use the tools that have helped you to help them.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. Like, it's so inspiring in that attraction marketing piece. And on that note, and your business, Claire, how can people get a hold of you to work with you?
Yeah, my Instagram is just my name. So it's Claire Bays, ClaireBays. And so they can just DM me on Instagram if they would like. I'm very active there. And then I also do have my website, which is for my coaching business, which is www.clairebayscoach.com. And that they can either just sign right up immediately on the site for the group offering, which is insanely cool. I have an app and it is so good. And there are custom meal plans and customized workout programs. And then we do once weekly coaching calls with the whole crew, and there's a community chat, and it's a badass product. And then if they want the elevated experience where they're going to do some one-on-one work with me as well, then they just fill out an application that takes less than 2 minutes to do that there. And so that's another way that they can reach me if the coaching lane is resonating with them. And then I do also have the podcast. I will say we got to episode 98, I believe, through the end of last year.
Right.
Yeah, I know we're almost to 100. And all of those earlier episodes, they're all on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc. About the last 50 of them are available on YouTube in video format. I did not do video format for the first roughly 50. And then there has been a pause at this moment because I am so focused on this coaching business. And so I'm kind of pivoting. The podcast, the episodes are incredible. I cannot believe the guests that I've gotten to have. I cannot believe the conversations I've had the opportunity to have. It is the coolest thing. But anyway, at this point, we will likely pivot when we restart again. We'll keep going, but it will be a slightly different structure of the episodes than what has been previously. But still, there's all of that content there that's been created over the last 2-3 years. And it is, I guess, just 2 years. And it's really cool. So they can find that stuff there. And that's Conversations with Claire. Sorry.
Love it. Well, we'll definitely show that in the description so people can get a hold of you.
Thank you.
Claire, this has been super helpful. Really great conversation with you. Is there anything else that you would like to share with our listeners?
I don't know. I always like to finish with gratitude. And I feel like this was so much of me talking, so I want to know, a gratitude from each of you, if that's okay today. And then in addition to that, I guess when you were saying, what is the advice that you would give to an individual who was looking to make some sort of change? And you were speaking words specifically about alcohol, but what would you guys say? What would your answer be?
When you say gratitude, though, you give us one first and then I'll give you one. Give me an example.
Okay. Well, can we do your advice first and then we'll do the gratitudes? Is that okay?
Sure. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. I would say my advice is very heavily driven around habits, like habit stacking. Like Aaron was saying, I know I get up and I brush my teeth. And I'm just a firm believer in just habit stacking and just continue to do the hard things until they become the normal thing for you. So I would say that would be my advice. Just kind of, first of all, become aware of the behavior you're wanting to change and then make a plan around the habit, kind of harm reduction and then replace it with a good, healthy habit for yourself. I think that would be my advice.
Yeah. I like that a lot.
I'll give both. I'll give the gratitude and advice. So advice-wise, I think being open to speaking and meeting individuals. I think you kind of touched on this too, where you allow others to kind of help you and guide you. I think what ends up happening is when we have some bad habits, and you touched on this too, we surround ourselves with individuals that have that same habit. So there's never someone there to kind of coach you into, hey, here's some good, better habits you should be doing. So I think that's advice I would give is try to surround yourself with others, see what else is out there and kind of form better habits than some of the bad ones. Because whoever you're with already, if you haven't changed, there's that possibility that they're not willing to change. Or like you said, certain friends, and I've had this situation when I was younger, we don't realize that what I'm doing as far as drinking is not affecting me, but I might be affecting someone else. We might be in that same stage together, but in reality, it's really hurting them, right? When they go home and the next day, it's really affecting them. So I think it would be advice-wise, grow who you're following and, connect with others. And I think gratitude, I'm very thankful for what you're doing, right? Which is being on our podcast. And I think that's huge. It really shows people that there are other ways of, getting help. There's other ways of doing it. And you having the willingness to come out and kind of talk about your story and share it with others that might be in the same stage as you, right? I think that's very positive and very thankful that you're doing that.
Well, how do you top that, Ruth? I cannot do the same
You
way.
can't do the same one.
I
You can do
thought this
whatever
one
you want.
out. Yeah, it's going to be, you can. I think I probably said a bunch of stuff too. So that way I eliminated a lot of things that you might have been trying to say. So yeah.
Great. Thank you. I guess kind of going off of that, though, I am very thankful for the CrossFit community. I have met some incredible people, including yourself, and it kind of makes me emotional because I think I replaced my drinking. CrossFit had a lot to do with my recovery and the community that comes along with it. So that's what I'm grateful for. And I was not planning on crying today. So thanks.
Oh, okay. I'm so glad it asked though. I'm sorry. Will you be at TFX? Kind of random, but will you be at TFX?
I will.
I'll see you there.
We have 3 people competing. Oh, yep, awesome.
I'll see you there. I'll be emceeing, so I'll be running around doing all the but either way, we will meet, okay?
Yeah, can't wait.
I love that. Okay, my gratitude today is going to be oh, you know what? Since it is new enough, we have to talk about it. I'm grateful that I'm newly engaged.
Yay,
So
congrats.
that's like a big one. But anyway, yes, thank you so much. Yeah, that one, this ties in really, really well as well. Just that Jimmy, my now fiance, is someone that would not. So before I got sober, I believe he probably, and this is my opinion, I believe he probably would have thought that I was cute or whatever, right? But he is a person who is so driven, his actions day to day are so driven by his purpose, his mission, his goals, and he is so centered in his values that, like, I think he would have seen that behavior and been like, well, would be nice, but. And so today I get to be with an individual who operates that way as a result of sobriety and all of the work that comes with it. And so I'm super stoked to be engaged to a person that I feel that way about, right? And then it's just like all of that. I'm just firmly convinced like that a few years ago wasn't available to me, but today it is. And that's crazy.
That's great.
I love that for you. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
thank you. Thank you. It's wild. Yeah.
Well, yeah, thank you.
All right, guys. Claire, if you don't have anything else, this was awesome. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, I appreciate your time. It almost felt like it was such a bite-sized bit, and so I'm like, we could go so much deeper on so many things. But either way, I will just stay connected on social media and go from there.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for doing this.
Definitely.
Thank you, guys. We will talk to you next time.